So you could argue that M&T Bank's marketing team is now influencing culture through a sponsorship.
Welcome to the Supercharge Marketing Podcast. I'm Pius.
And I'm Thomas, and we're from Lumen 5, an AI video creator made by marketers for marketers. This podcast is for those who believe in the power of purposeful communication, brand storytelling, and thought leadership.
We feature the insights, experiences, and best practices shared by tenured marketers, communicators, and B2B leaders.
Are you ready to supercharge your marketing? Today, I'm joined by Jan Liebchen, a seasoned brand strategist and the SVP Head of Marketing at M&T Bank. With a global marketing background and a deep expertise in brand activation and sponsorships, Jan's work helps connect corporate brand strategy to real emotional impact. From high-stakes sponsorships to community-driven storytelling, he's shaping how M&T shows up across audiences and industries. Welcome, Jan.
Thomas, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about my favorite subject.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, your track record is really impressive, and there's a lot at the intersection of brand, banking, and partnerships. I definitely want to dive into the Bills partnership, being a big Bills fan, but we'll leave that towards the second half. But I'm really, just curious how you've, transformed experiences for your audiences on the global level. So let's dive in. Now, you're at in a complex financial organization, of course, the banking sector, and you've led brand strategy there for a while. I guess what's so unique about building brand trust in the banking sector?
So I think the biggest challenge that we have in the banking sector is that we're dealing with a commoditized product, right? And so you don't have the luxury that my colleagues have to have a physical product to deal with. And so the story you tell and the positioning that you create has to go beyond those things that are maybe immediately experienceable by our customers, right? And so we have to think through how can we emphasize the things that matter. And so the analogy that I like to take is it's less relevant the nature of the tool you have, right? So everybody has a checking account. It's much more relevant if you get to partner with someone that knows when to use which tool, right? So everyone has a hammer at their house, but knowing to use it in a way that maybe makes something more efficient, quicker, better, more appropriate to the project or objectives that you have. That's really how we like to structure our thinking. And I really like the question that you asked around building trust, because obviously in the banking sector, it's all about trust and that we will do what we want, what we say we will do when we say we'll do it. That's critically important to the individual. It's even more important to those folks that lead businesses, whether they are small to medium-sized business or corporate businesses. So we really want to make sure that we frame out how trust works and how we will show up in those situations. And so our challenge as brand communicators is we're dealing with something that everyone has, and how do we tell the parts of our capabilities in a way that resonates and the way that also our colleagues can then fulfill that promise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So good. I do want to dive into trust a little bit. I know you mentioned it a few times there. I guess practically speaking, like how does that show up in your brand strategy, and how do you think about trust, and how do you really build it with the different audiences that you're communicating with?
Yeah, so it's really easy to say, I'm trustworthy.
Yeah.
It's much more powerful to have an existing customer say that on our behalf. And so our strategy is that we allow our customers to tell their story and their experience with us out of their own words and their own experience. And that we've found is much more powerful in landing that. And then the other thing that you do is you build trust, right? Trust doesn't just happen. You earn trust. We all know that. And so it's really about ensuring that what we say on the brand side is understood and executed on the business side, right? So that with every experience, you understand that when M&T says something, they do it. And so slowly that trust is built.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I think externally, as you said, I think the important part is always, fulfilling what you say externally. Internally, though, how does that work? Like, because I think you understand the importance of this, right? How do you communicate this internally to everybody, all the different stakeholders, that like, hey, this has to happen for us to be successful?
Yeah, I mean it's really difficult, right? And understandably so, because my colleagues have maybe other clearer, more direct objectives that they have to satisfy, and sometimes at least the perception is that they're at odds. So it's our job to clarify the intent and also to do some level of education so that there's greater understanding. It's also our job to, we call it internally, to enroll people so that they feel they have a role and a part in both the building, the maintaining, and the communicating of our brand. Because the reality is, I may have channels that speak really loudly, right? Advertising. But you, when you engage with a client or when you interact with a human at any level as a representative of M&T Bank, you're also communicating brand experience, right? And so everyone has a role. So understanding that they have a circumstance that may not be clearly aligned with your objectives and helping them see how getting aligned is helpful to us all. And then also enrolling them in the process is how we try and find success. It doesn't always work smoothly. That's just the nature of being humans. But I think we've found some success, as you can tell from our activations, that there is a deep appreciation and understanding for it. But it's an ongoing process, and you really, you have to keep pushing. That's something actually that, if I could just intersect on that, that I learned over the times. It's like so I'm German, German born. And so, I have a close, natural, stereotypical affinity to data and hard facts. And the reality, and something that I learned, is that you have to first understand where the person is coming from an emotional standpoint. They may have already come to a conclusion emotionally. You have to address that first, because before they can even digest the data and science behind brand. And so navigating both those sides is something that I've found some success with over times. And I was able to leverage my German love for data and insights and the science of it, but then also my African, so I grew up in East Africa and Tanzania, my African heart and understanding how humans engage with information and how humans engage with each other has been helpful to navigate that through. But it's a complex question, so I don't know that I'll be able to solve it entirely today.
Absolutely. Well, you have a really interesting background again, from being born in Germany and then East Africa and then now in the States. So yeah, I think it's given you probably a really good global perspective and really, learning different cultures. And as you said, I think a lot of us, well, they often say, right, we make decisions, based on emotions, but we back it up with data, right? And so learning the nuances there, I think is really important. Now, I really like what you said about like external. How do we build trust externally? Also internal. We've covered both of those. So, yeah, I think trust, as you said, was the main thing that we're trying to do in the financial sector. Now, how do we kind of shift towards lead generation? I know banking is a highly regulated, risk-sensitive environment. So what are kind of the nuances there, and how do you approach, customer communications, differentiation, lead generation in such a highly regulated industry, which I'm sure is a big question, but I'll throw it over to you.
It's a massive question. So regulations are there for a reason. They serve a purpose. And so we want to be compliant with it, right? So we want to communicate in a way that we collectively as a society believe to be right? So your personally identified information is really important. We understand that, right? And so the consequence to us, though, however, is that in certain things, so like, equal lending, we aren't allowed to apply some of the, surgical, more modern lead generation tools the way maybe other industries can. And so, the good news is that there's an even playing field and all of our competitors have the same issue. And we do our best to be as personalized as possible while still being compliant with regulation. The question of how that impacts also differentiation and personalized communication is, it's becoming more and more AI driven in terms of our ability to do that. In candor, we're probably, a little bit not at the forefront of where that's happening. That's in part because of how sensitive it is for us to maintain the integrity of the data that comes out, right? So if we wanted to have an AI agent do personalized communications, we would have to feed it personally identified information of the customers and or prospects we are speaking with. And that represents a challenge for us. And so we have to kind of balance our desire to protect our valuable information of the customers and prospects while also leveraging ways to deliver more relevant and timely messages to you.
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you mentioned AI. That's something I'm very interested in learning more about from you and how your team is exploring it and potentially implementing it. Like you said, there's the all these risks associated with it, but there's also all these benefits. And so, yeah, especially in your regulated industry, like you kind of mentioned, there are some benefits and some things, but what have you been potentially able to explore within the guidelines or, maybe the approval of IT or security or something like that?
Right. So I think for us, when it comes to that, is to have, greater clarity on who you are, right? So having greater insights as to when and how you make financial decisions so that we can then deliver messages more timely to you. So leveraging AI primarily is for us to make insights more accessible, more affordable, and more timely. So we've found some small successes in doing that. I don't know how many details I can divulge at this point, but we are working, I think, like most financial services firms, on digesting massive amounts of data in a way that allows us to follow the fragmentation that's happening, particularly our media consumption, so that we can then deliver messages that are relevant to you and your journey in the places where you are consuming media. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely. And I think obviously there's probably a lot of appetite from teams internally to use AI and use some of these tools that'll really help. But I think you're also probably very cautious of it and
right.
how to use it. Yeah.
But so if you think about AI, for example, like one obvious thing in the brand marketing world is creative, right? To create an ad is a timely and costly endeavor, or has been, and that obviously is becoming more and more quick. There are at least currently some quality challenges that are there. There's also some IP issues that we have to address, right? So when an AI agent creates an image, they take fragments of other images sometimes, and there may be some IP issues. So we are a little bit more conservative around that approach because we want to make sure that we do right by all the partners we work with. And so creating creative on scale is really interesting. But then also testing creative is really interesting. So insights, how can we generate more insights as to what is relevant in terms of messaging, in terms of creative, is also a really interesting exploration that's happening. And there's more and more solutions that are out in the marketplace that are helping marketers like myself to contemplate and leverage the technology that is growing.
Yeah. And you mentioned it. Yeah. Creative is a big space. And I think one of the things you said is quality, right? And yeah, I think AI can help in a lot of ways, but is it the quality that you're used to or you want to put out there, especially when we're talking about trust and building trust in such a highly regulated space and where trust matters so much? From what I'm hearing is there has to be
also
some
authenticity, right? So is
Yes.
the message feel right? So like I told you, we have our clients tell their perspective and their stories. And so if we then have an AI start to create ads, the authenticity may get lost. So really, it's probably less about creating stories from scratch and maybe more some of the like high resource intensive work, like duplicating ads, in creating versions of it, digital banner ads that take a lot of hour, like agency hours or internal hours to create. And so that's likely where we'll at least initially start off with, but I can see that in the very near future, entire ad shoots may be replaced by AI systems.
Yeah. Exciting to think about, but also, yeah. From what I'm hearing, there has to be oversight, from your perspective in your
Yes.
teams, and somebody's always got to double check it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Well, yeah, I know we've talked about AI, and I'm sure we could explore a lot more because it's such a broad topic. But I did want to ask, as a Bills fan, but also it just sounds really cool that you've been able to kind of really launch some major partnerships, I think with the Ravens as well, but we're not going to talk about them because they're a rival of the Bills. But anyways, I really want to hear, how did that partnership come about? What was your involvement? What kind of value and engagement did you bring? And what has it delivered for the brand? Obviously, it's a cool partnership, but if it delivers nothing, then what's the point, right? So I do want to hear about the results as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the Bills relationship with M&T is a really long one. It's 1985. I think
Wow.
it's one of the longest sponsorship relationships with an NFL team in the league's history. And so it's really evolved since. In the first couple of years, it maybe was a little bit on the smaller side. And now it's evolved to us being the official bank of the Buffalo Bills. And we also recently announced that we extended our relationship with the Bills to also now take place in the brand new stadium that the Bills organization is building as a founding partner of the Buffalo Bills. And so I negotiated that contract with the colleagues at the Bills. And so what has me and my team have been able to do since I joined here is to really understand how sponsorships work, and therefore then what you can do in order to leverage the investment that you put into these. And so the fundamental understanding that you have to have when you're thinking about sponsorships is that sponsorships essentially are a conversation between the property and its naturally attracted audience. And so when I say conversation, I mean in its broadest sense, right? So when you go to the game, you're essentially consuming that and you're having that conversation. And the way you have that conversation is that you may buy a fan, like a jersey, or you may engage with them. You may also engage with them digitally, right? So you may be on their app. You may engage with them on TV by watching their games, right, et cetera. So there's many ways that the audience naturally is attracted to them. And so for us as sponsors, in order to truly make a difference, and the difference, I can talk to you about how we measure it, particularly around brand health, but then also conversions, is that you have to join that conversation in a way that's authentic to who you are, right? So we still need to be a bank. We can't join that conversation pretending to be ESPN. So you will see that in our communications, we don't criticize a coach's call or the selection of the new draftee, right? So we tend to participate in a way that's authentic to who we are as a bank. And the position we've taken is that we are a fan and that we can authentically own that position. And then the second thing you need to do, and this is natural to any conversation that humans have, is you want to join it to be real, like be Thomas, right? And then you want to add value to that conversation in order for people to remember you. So if you're at a party and you add value to the conversation and you're authentic to it, they will remember, oh yeah, that the Jan guy was really interesting. He said these 5 things. It really made the whole collective discussion, the whole collective engagement better. And so things we look at, for example, is what are natural pain points in the journey that we can help with. And pain points may be as simple as getting to and from the stadium, but it also may be I want to have deeper, richer experiences. So how can we help with providing you access to insights, content, apps? So we sponsor the app of the Bills, etc. And then we also want to attach that to products and services. So getting checking accounts and debit products that are Bills themed and those types of things, so that we can then connect that conversation to a product and service that's natural to us. And so we've looked at that and have continuously helped our friends at the Bills help us generate and extract value from that investment to the degree that we are quite satisfied with it. And so it starts off with having a really analytical mindset, right? So we know precisely where the cameras swing when they're in the stadium and placing our logos in that movement. But we also know that there's multiple touch points. So we're really focused on social media and very frequently outpunch our competitors in terms of the engagement rate that generates, because we truly understand the ritual and that coming together and what resonates, and using the love language, to quote a colleague of mine in the social media team, so that engagement is real. We also understand that, for example, we changed our spokesperson strategy, right? So going with rookies, because we understand that the new generation of players come with built-in audiences that have a high degree of engagement. So I can give you an example. We had a partnership with a fantastic guy, Stefan Diggs. He's now since moved on to the Patriots, right? But he's a really smart and great person. And he did a video with us that generated over 1 million organic views and had about, I think, like 100,000 engagements. So as you know, the name of the game is less views now. It's much more engagements, like, clicks, comments, shares, all of that. And then if we look at, for example, Keon Coleman, who is a rookie last year, that he had this naturally built-in audience. We did a video with him. It only had like 250,000 views, but it had the exact same amount of engagements.
Interesting.
Because his built-in audience consumes content of his in a way that is much more engaged. It's a much more engaged audience. And so we can then authentically let him be his own persona, but attach ourselves to that conversation that he then has with his naturally attracted audience. And so what we've also done is we try to think through how we can consistently move the needle on some of these activities. So hospitality, how do we ensure the best possible experience for our customers, our prospective customers, and then how do we generate direct sales from the activity in some way. It's a really exciting and interesting partnership.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's super interesting. I love hearing about it. And I think one of there's a lot that stood out, but one of the things that was interesting is you said, we want to just be a fan, right? And I think positioning yourself that way comes across a lot more authentically to the audience, that you're not some corporate, bank who just wants their money, right? You're like, hey, we're just a fan like you. And, if we can help you in your day-to-day with, checking or whatever, we're here to do that, right? And so that was really cool. You did mention kind of sales at the end of the day. It sounds like, you've obviously measured engagements and some of these, videos that you were talking about with the different players. How have you kind of shown, let's say, maybe the ROI, or like, how do you of this partnership, like, how do you say, hey, this has been successful because XYZ? Engagements is great, but has it led to like actual, sales and revenue, if you can prove that?
First of all, I know. I like that you were saying, if you can prove it, we can. I would, the first thing I think you needed to do, the way we also talked about, engaging your internal stakeholders, is to allow everyone to understand where a sponsorship is its most powerful. So while, yes, there's direct sales, that's not the most efficient use of the sponsorship. It's one of them, but it's not the most efficient. So if you're only and singularly attached to how many checking accounts we opened, then the investment is really hard to generate return on investment on in sponsoring the build. So you have to apply multiple layers of it, so that as a collective, you get a full picture of what it could be. So you have to start at the top of the funnel. You have to see like media equivalency that you generate. You have to see like brand health scores that you generate. You have to see that you have, community and client engagements that you generate. And then on top of that layer, you layer the accounts that we generate. And we know both on game day, but also as a consequence of the existence of branded, co-branded products, that we know how many of those are in circulation. We also know from placing ads that it directly generates direct applications for accounts. So we know that, but we also are very aware that it is not a lower funnel tactic, but it's more of a upper to mid funnel tactic that does have instances that goes into the lower funnel. As long as you understand that and then can attach your next level activity to leverage or to take advantage of that, familiarity or consideration that you've generated, I think you can attribute a portion of those sales to the investment in the builds as well.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, no, that's really good. And I think as you mentioned, your analytical mind and your emphasis on data really helps kind of, I'm sure, sell that internally. We often say here, marketing is not arts and crafts, right? It has to be directly tied to revenue. And how do you prove that? And I think a lot of marketers and communicators and brand people, struggle, I think, to really sell that internally, sell something like that. So let's talk about like this partnership is super interesting. Like, what advice would you have?
I may say something
sure.
like,
Yeah.
let's maybe just because you said it, I think it's super interesting. I may say something that's really maybe slightly controversial.
Sure.
And so I totally understand and appreciate our desire to be, like you said, my German brain, to be data driven. But you have to understand realities of the top funnel, the brand area, and what it does for performance marketing. You have to understand that. And you also have to understand that there is some level of art and science to the notion. And so the best analogy that I've come up with that it seems to generate some understanding is if you've identified going to the gym as one way that you may build muscle or lose pounds that you seek to lose, and you then work out for a 24-hour period nonstop, and then you go and look to get the signals that worked, the data available to you will give you the wrong information, will lead you to the wrong conclusion. So it's not that you lack that you lack the ability or understanding to seek out data. It's that if you look at brand activity and after the brand activity in the immediacy, the way you have been trained as an organization to also look at performance marketing activities, you will come to the wrong conclusion, which in the case of the gym is that it didn't work. But if you did that same activity every day for 2 hours for 6 months and then look at the data, there will be proof that the action worked. So when I say art and science, there needs to be some level of belief that working out works to get you through those 6 months to the point when measuring and analyzing the data makes sense. And so that level of belief also gets you through as an organization, because you have to invest for longer periods of time, in some instances a couple years, before you actually see the benefit. So that's part of the challenge. So it's not that the data doesn't exist or it's hard to say. The sequence or the length of time that you give the data to become mature, that's the issue, if that makes sense.
So good. Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great take and great soundbite as well, and a really practical way to, take something away from this conversation. I think is how do you use maybe that analogy even to share some of this internally and sell some of these initiatives that you're looking at. So I really appreciate that. And the partnership itself, I wanted to also ask, what advice would you have for anybody listening who, maybe is thinking of a partnership like this, where there is probably a huge initial investment, and how do you kind of go about approaching that? And then maybe, you shared a little bit, but how do you sell that internally, to get approved? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's some, here's how you do it optimally, and here's some reality. Right? So the reality is that you will be talking to your leaders that may have a hard time understanding all of the facets of the partnership that it generates for you, particularly if it's a really large partnership that you do, and may single into the things that they understand or have experienced. And often hospitality and tickets then becomes the area of focus, even though in terms of value contribution, it's probably on the smaller side of things, because that's what they've been to. They've been to the Super Bowl, they've been to a football game, they've been to a theater performance, whatever that may be. So just having an understanding that that's where their brain may be like, wait, I'm paying what million for how many tickets, right? That may be where the math is off. So there's that. So my recommendation to you is to first understand what it is that you're undertaking, because part of what is challenging with the sponsorships is that it has these two levels of investment in it, right? So essentially, you're buying the toy, and then you also need to buy the batteries. So in terms of outlay, you pay $100 for the toy, and then you have to pay another $20 for the batteries. That is a really hard thing for an organization to digest. So the activation, which is the phase in which you extract value from the investment, costs additional money, right? The problem with that, not doing that, is that if you are not willing as an organization to buy the batteries, then you need to tell yourself that I won't be able to leverage the reason the toy exists, which is to allow you to play, to have fun, whatever the objective is, right? I can take another analogy, right? So if you buy a car, you have to have money for insurance and gas. Otherwise, you can't use the car. Mm-hmm. And then the car designed to get you from A to B quickly, safely, cannot do what it's designed to do. Often, an unsuccessful waste of money investment that you see around there is that the sponsorships are under activated because it's another round of, hey, I just wanted to pay 5 million. I need another million. And then internally, like, no way. You already have 5 million, now do something. And the problem is you can't. So having great clarity on activation as part of the cost, right? So when you present it, and let's say it's a $1 million presentation, make sure that you say it's actually $1.25 million, right? And that you clearly show the value of it. And there's lots and lots of research. So if you're going out there, you will have lots of data that proves that's how you should structure it. If you don't activate, that's the biggest problem. And once you then do it, you can show how you can actually, if done well, replace other existing marketing expenditures and get a deeper, more meaningful connection on the top of the funnel when you leverage sponsorships, right? So part of the issue that we have as advertisers is that we're kind of like talking at you. Right. Whereas the expectation more and more is that I want a conversation. Right? And so don't get me wrong, I love advertising, right? And it works. But sponsorships have the ability to have a conversation, and you often do that at a passion point. So humans are, still, as much as we may be leaders of organizations and have practical reasons for it, the emotional level of decisioning is still there. And so I'll give you an example of that. One of our most successful ads in terms of generating consideration, in terms of brand health, is an ad that we did with a client called Golden Cup. Golden Cup client is this beautiful couple that deeply love each other and have had a passion for coffee. And the imagery resonates, right? So everyone's had a great cup of coffee, looking out the window and having some experience. So it's really a feeling that goes to the heart. And so, yes, we talk about how we've helped this couple, and they talk about how we've been material, but it's really on a really human level. Having an amazing cup of coffee is just understood on the very human level. And so not underestimating a passion point that a sponsorship can deliver and how you can leverage that, as opposed to an ad that you could make. Even if you make a really, really good ad, you yourself are a passionate Bills fan, that is something that is really hard to replicate and worth the additional investment. It's just, you have to understand that you have to activate. The other thing you have to understand, that you have to invest for at least 3, preferably 5 to 10 years, because it's a slow moving activity. It takes time, but once it's done, it works really well. I'll give you another example of how that is. So our headquarters are in Buffalo, New York. We also sponsor the naming rights partnership of the Ravens. As a consequence, or one of the many consequences, is that the folks in Baltimore believe our headquarters are in Baltimore, which is a really good thing to think, right? We are of the community, and a headquarters is just a headquarters, but it's indicative of how much the passion that they have for the Ravens has translated into the passion that they now have for us.
Yes, that's a really good point and a really good example as well. And I learned that as well. I didn't think so. I probably would have guessed Baltimore as well. So that's how well that's translated even here
There's
up here
an
in Canada.
upcoming movie called Baltimoreans, and in that movie, they're talking about going to a Ravens game. And as you may know, the Ravens players coined the stadium as the bank.
Yeah.
Right? Come see me at the bank. And so in that movie, an expression of culture, they're referring to the stadium as the bank. So you could argue that M&T Bank's marketing team is now influencing culture through a sponsorship.
Yeah, I love it. Oh man. Well, I think there's so much there. I love all the analogies and all the stories and all the successes there. Could really talk about that so much longer because, especially as you said, it's one of my passions, and so you've unlocked that, and now you've you've really engaged me in the conversation because this is a passion of mine. So really good tip there, I think, to take away as well is where's your audience, where are their passions, and can you meet them in that passion, right? So that's really cool. We talked a lot about the successes. I know you mentioned this before, but I always like to end off conversations like this and asking, what's one thing you've learned? What's maybe one mistake you made, or something that didn't go so well, and what was a big learning moment for you?
And so it's less about my view around brand strategy and more about how do you get an organization to embrace brand strategy, and that, understanding that I was always under the impression that, a data-led, clear argument would serve itself, and that there wasn't any alternative than the one that I presented that was viable because I had all the data. It was very clear. And so the mistake I made was to underestimate maybe the lack of understanding of the brand channel, but also that there may be alternative outcomes that the folks that you're trying to enroll internally may have in their mind, and they may have emotional attachments to those, and that any amount of data may not necessarily move them along the needle. And so addressing those emotional attachments to outcomes that may not be the one that you're seeking has been something that I had to learn over the career in order to get the organization to embrace the brand strategy that we're looking to place. So the learning is, I assume that people would be along because it's self-evident in my mind, but it isn't necessarily the case, particularly if you're dealing with an organization who at its core isn't necessarily a brand organization. So it's not like Procter & Gamble or Nike, but we're a financial services firm where we have really smart bankers leading our organization, and they may not, fully embrace the intricacies of brand strategy and brand marketing.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, no, appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's a good thing to learn and also to take away for anybody listening. So yeah, I really appreciate your time. That's it for today. Jan, that was a fun conversation. I appreciate all that. It was really good to chat with you and learn from you. There were so many things I took away and learned from. So thank you for all your takes, your analogies, and everything you shared today. It was great.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you too, Thomas. Thanks so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Good luck with the podcast, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Thank you so much. All right.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and rate us wherever you listen to your podcast. Or leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. If video is not already part of your marketing content strategy, it's not too late to start. Create amazing videos with Lumen5's AI-powered video creator without the need for any design or video editing experience. Check us out at lumen5.com to supercharge your marketing, or follow us on LinkedIn for updates and resources. As always, keep making purposeful content in this B2B world. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.